Hey everyone, Chimerical here, bringing to you another Worlds analysis VOD from Worlds 2022. This time I want to cover the T1 versus RNG Game 2. As we see here on the damage graph here, I remember the casters being really surprised by how much damage Zeus did during the deciding Elder fight, and I just kind of wanted to go back and highlight what enabled Zeus to kind of be able to get as strong as he was despite being really behind for a lot of the game, dying a lot, getting picked a lot on side and that kind of thing. And some of it is due to his team, and as well as some of it being due to RNG's decisions, and finally just some personal decisions he makes. So I'm going to highlight just a couple of different things that happen throughout the game that I think are really important for why Zeus is able to perform in this fight. Not including obviously his performance in the fight itself, but being able to hit his item specs and that kind of thing. So the first thing I want to look at is about 21 minutes into this VOD. It's about 15 minutes into the game. We're going to see Zeus do the first time of something that I think is really helping him, keeping up with Breathe, even though Breathe has a lot of kills at this point, is here. Watch what Zeus does here. He's going to push the wave in. Pretty normal. Faker doing some 6 side steps. So he's going to push in the wave here. Now what he's going to do is he's going to walk the Krugs here after just checking his vision, making sure he's okay, able to clear out any wards. He's going to go and take Krugs here. And the way to kind of frame your thinking about this going forward as we see him take more and more jungle camps is when he's taking these, it's about worth a non-cannon minion wave worth of gold when he goes and does this. So a way that I like to kind of frame it is basically Zeus goes, pushes a wave, then he goes and he walks to Krugs. He's getting about a non-cannon wave's worth of gold. So he's getting basically another wave, while his wave that's here is going to meet Breeze's wave. And once he finishes his Krugs, he's effectively able to go and get a third wave. So in the time that Breathe is pushing a wave in, Zeus is able to push his own wave, go, get a second wave, and then walk back for his third wave. And so just kind of keep that framing device in mind as we move forward with this VOD. As we go to the next timestamp here, which is a couple minutes later, about 21 minutes into the game. Find it. Here we go. So watch what Zeus does here off this reset here. He's not going to immediately walk to bot lane here to answer the wave. Instead, what he's going to do is he's going to walk in to his blue side jungle. He's going to grab his blue and his Gromp before he even bothers to come down here to try and answer the wave that Breathe is pushing in. And there's a couple reasons that he does this. His team is hovering around top side right now. Specifically, Owner is going to be spending quite some time here to make sure that Faker is okay, and because Baron is currently the most important objective on the map for both these teams. So Owner just wants to kind of hover around here, make sure everything's all good, make sure Faker doesn't get pressured off, potentially get killed by Xiaohu if he tries to 1v1 him. And Zeus realizes this, so he's going to go and take his jungle, and basically Owner, when he finally resets and goes back bot side, he's going to have his Gromp refreshed, and on top of that, Wave's also bot side. And so the other play that RNG has here is Wave can just go in while Owner is hovering top side and steal all these camps if he wanted. And Zeus is basically denying that potential gold from Wei, or even Breathe if they want to donate it over the Fiora to make her stronger than she already is, because it is Sejuani and he has 2 items, so he doesn't really need a ton of gold at this point. But most importantly, he's basically funneling himself really safe and free gold that he can get while Breathe is pushing in bot here. So even though if we just go forward a bit, we see that they end up finding him behind his tier 1 here, and he ends up dying here. He's still got about a cannon worth of gold at this point, since it's roughly about 190, 200 gold to get the Gromp and the blue there, and the cannon waves are worth about 180-ish, I believe. at this point in the game. So even though he dies, he actually doesn't really lose too much in terms of gold value. It's about what he would get from collecting a wave and dying for it. So, I mean, obviously, it's not great that he dies, right? He loses tier 1 and everything, but for the situation he's in, he basically gets as much gold as he possibly could. So if we go just a bit further here into the VOD, about here, this is where something important is going to start happening. Yahoo's going to walk up here. He's going to try to get the tier 2 tower while his team pressures topside. In theory, that should be really worth it for Silas here, because this is 600 gold for those of you who aren't sure the exact gold values here. If you kill the turret here as Silas with nobody around, you get basically 2 kills worth of gold, of local gold, from killing the tier 2 tower. So this should be pretty good for Silas if he's able to get this here without being contested. But he ends up overcommitting for this tower. He does get it, right? 600 gold right there. You saw it pop up in his character for a second. The problem is that RNG has 4 members here, and they really want to pressure this Baron here. Especially now that they've seen Keria is down here, and Guma is on the way too. But the problem is that Zeus has his TP. So really what's happening here is even though they have 3 members here, Yahoo's pretty much already dead at this point. The most likely play he has is stealing the Nada ult and potentially buying some time for him to escape with a hostile takeover, maybe wasting Jayce's flash or Guma's flash. But realistically, he's not going to really be able to pull off any sort of sick 1v3 outplay. He's pretty much done for, especially since Keria is here with Ignite. But since Zeus has TP, it's not really a 2v4 here. It's really a 3v4 with these 2 around. And that's a problem because RNG doesn't really have any amazing answers to Akali running in and dashing around if Gala is not able to answer his W that gives true sight to Akali. Yeah, they can Nautilus dredge line onto her, and that does buy some space for RNG. But we see as soon as this TP comes down, RNG just has to leave. They can't finish this Baron here. They're going to get poked off by Zeus. Because even though he's 0-5 at this point, he's still 2-hiding Jayce. They can't pretend that he doesn't exist, especially since one of their frontliners is now dead. And T1, in my opinion, capitalizes off this really well for Zeus. He basically feeds himself a free wave off the TP, and then they're able to get the tower here, which gives them another extra 100 gold before he dips. So overall, they get a really good pick on Silas, which buys them pressure so that RNG can't do Baron. Zeus does lose his TP, which is unfortunate. However, he's able to basically convert another 200 gold for himself off the TP. So even though now he has to go top, Faker's TP is coming up, which is very fortunate for T1, so they basically can just then Faker bot, have Zeus start playing towards top, and Zeus gets a nice little gold swing out of that play for basically only losing his TP. So overall, really good time buyer for T1 to continue to scale on their carries here, and RNG is starting to lose a little bit of map pressure that we see from Zhao getting it. And so we're going to skip to the next timer here, about 32 minutes. T1 tries to look for a pick here onto RNG. And unfortunately they're driven off. But that's okay. This is fine because this is only 3rd dragon here for RNG. This isn't the soul, and on top of that, it's also Cloud Soul. So it's not even like, it's not that it's not useless, but it's not as useful compared to something like an Infernal or a Hex Tech. So this is actually okay, in my opinion, for T1, because RNG now has to overcommit, or they feel the need to overcommit to this dragon here. And now Zeus gets to go and walk top. If you watch him here, he just gets to go and walk top. He gets to go farm this wave for free because now RNG have no pressure topside because they are all bot. They're trying their best with Zeus and Nolus here, but they can only do so much as a 2-man. On top of that, Ming wants to reset to get more wards. So realistically, there's not a whole lot they can do here. And Jayce is able to run top, catch the wave there, go and catch cards again. He's able to get himself a bunch more gold here. So even though T1 loses the dragon there and they lose Faker's flash, overall I think in terms of actual raw gold value, they get a pretty decent swing there, especially for their Jayce, which is really important. They really want to hit this 3-item on Jayce, they really want to hit 3-item on Xayah. So if they're able to force RNG members to overcommit later like they did, they are able to buy time for them to scale, which is the most, this is like the critical part of the game for T1. Can we get our item spikes on our carries before RNG decides they want to try and end the game? So if we go here just a little bit further to this pick here, this is really important. Is this pick attempt for RNG? This isn't a bad look by any means. Whiffing ult here though is really important for T1. Because what happens now is Faker is able to TP, and Gala is not anywhere near here. He's still mid lane right now. So this is effectively a 45 right now. And they've already lost one of their, RNG's already lost one of their most important engaged tools with the Glacial Prison going down. And then what you're going to see happen as this fight continues to play out here is Ming sees that Owner's trying to go for a flank here, drops a dredge line. Or depth charge, sorry. I keep calling it the dredge line. That's his look. Drops the depth charge here on Owner. But Owner has his ult, so he's going to burn his ult here. He's going to blink out to here and be safe from this potential look here. Now, we did lose Zeus flash. Did lose carry a flash. Hostile takeover. In theory, not great, right? Because we're about to lose Viego ult too. But they're down these two spells. These two spells are so important for RNG to be able to pressure Baron. Now that they're both down, their Baron pressure has basically evaporated. And this is really good too, because if you actually look at the vision setup here, RNG has like complete control of this red side jungle here. This should be terrifying for T1 to walk into. And in theory, if RNG has their engaged tools up, they can pressure this pretty freely and then force a turn over the wall, because all their champions can follow up over wall really well and potentially end the game if they get a good fight. But since they burn Glacial Prison and the Death Charge, the Sejuani are and the Nautilus are, there you can't really do a whole lot. And you'll even see here they'll try to basically bluff the Baron here. But as soon as T1 starts walking their general direction, immediately they have to get off, because they realize they can't actually force this anymore because they don't have their engaged tools. Ming only has one ward left and he has no controls left. They have no controls in general except for Breeze Pink ward here. So they're struggling really hard with being able to have any more vision control, and now that T1's clearing it out, now they don't know what's happening, and this is really scary for RNG here. So overall, really important to think about RNG's engaged tools and what happens if they whiff, like they did with Wei missing his ult. The one nice thing is, and we'll see it a little bit later, that RNG is able to actually capitalize on Zeus's flash being burned here with the mid pick, but something else happens that kind of ends up negating it a little bit, unfortunately. But we'll get to that shortly. So at this point, Baron pressure gone, RNG has to reset, get some items, get healed, that sort of thing. More time for T1. This is exactly what T1 wants. And watch what Zeus does here. Doesn't go sideways here. Let's breathe push out. Instead, grabs these. Look at this wave. 2 cannon minions here for Zeus. This is so nice for a top laner here. Zeus is able to effectively get himself about 350, 400, maybe even more gold for himself here. Having just finished his Warhammer, this sequence here for Zeus, where he gets the wolves, he gets the gromp, and he gets this wave with 2 cannons. This finishes his regardless, 100%. And so even though this Jayce is 0, 5, and 1, even though his Fiora is very fed and up an item right now on him, he's spiked pretty hard. And on top of that, he's not that far down in XP. He's only down 1 level, which is pretty impressive in my opinion. It goes to show just how well Zeus has done at getting himself constant golden EXP despite dying as much as he had this game. And I think we're starting to kind of see Zeus's efforts, as well as T1's general efforts, as well as RNG's misplays, build up and start to show both in him as well as Guma's general strength. And we go a little bit more here. This is another really big pick here for T1. If they don't get this pick, this is actually a really hard game state for them to play, because what ends up happening here is they overcommit top and they lose Zeus here. But because they're able to fight this pick on Jiaohu, what ends up happening is they get the pick. They do lose the mid tower and inhib, and they do lose Zeus here. However, they're able to immediately reset after finishing the Jiaohu pick, and they're able to start collecting these super waves here. Now, RG can't really look for much else here. So even though, yeah, they lose Zeus here, I do think they got a little bit lucky that they were able to find Jiaohu on the side lane, because if he's weak siding really hard and forces them to overcommit and then gets out, well, now T1's just down a member and they can pressure side lanes pretty freely with 5-man if Jiaohu doesn't get picked. But since he does, they're able to basically find a way to solve the game even longer. And from here, I think they do another really big play that basically, this is where I think they negate the Zeus pick and losing their mid inhib, is they go for this Baron play here. And so what happens is they understand, T1 understands that their Baron damage is insanely high, with Xayah being like three items or so at this point. Jayce is 3 items, and they have Viego, so they have really good Baron melt here. And so they're able to burn down Baron before RNG can respond, and then they do an insanely good job of kiting back here with their really high range comp. And Guma like just smurfs this fight here. He's just fearless. He's walking up and he's poking them out. And Zeus has a really critical shot blast. It basically makes it impossible for RNG to fight back. At this point, T1's negated this mid pick because now they have Baron for the next like 3-ish minutes or so, which is about how long their inhib is down for. And it's really hard for Sylas and Fiora to just pressure side lanes now, because their minions on T1's side for side lanes are going to be much harder to kill and require much more commitment, especially for Sylas. Fiora not so much, but Sylas is going to have a pretty tough time pushing out his side lane in the 1v1. And even though RNG has the super minions mid lane, having the Baron minions on T1's side negates, it doesn't completely negate, but it definitely reduces the strength of the pressure from the supers in mid lane. However, I don't think this is the game ender for RNG. The game ender for RNG comes about 5 minutes later. It's a macro decision that I think ultimately makes it pretty hard for RNG to close out this game. It's coming up here. We go a little bit here. I think they have the right idea here. They have Fiora topside. They've only got the blue buff or red buff seal. Very nice. He's able to walk up. He walks back. And they want to hold the side lanes here. However, I think they make a really big mistake here, and we'll see it in a second here as we watch the map. Please skip a little more. A little more. Here's the problem. We have Sylas pushing top. We have Fiora moving to this fight. I think this is such a massive blunder from RNG's side in terms of macro. Zeus doesn't have TP, and they're gonna send whoever to match this Fiora here. Akali absolutely cannot deal with Fiora, but she can kind of deal with Silas. Zeus can't deal with Fiora. He does have flash, he does have stopwatch, so he can stall if Fiora tries to go for a dive. But he has these 3 items. He also has Stride Breaker. So he's pretty tanky against tower, and on top of that, he has a ton of ability haste. And he has a slow built in on his item as well as Z. So it's pretty hard, in my opinion, even with flash and stopwatch, for Zeus to actually match this Fiora in the side lane. On top of that, Breeze kills towers really quickly because he is Fiora. So in my opinion, they should be having Fiora match top here and have Xiaohu being moved to the fight. Because on top of all these things, he does have perfect execution right now, so it's a little hard. But if he is able to get the hostile takeover, this Silas can stall fight for a pretty long time for RNG and buy even more pressure for Breeze. Because this Fiora basically has to be 2v1 at the minimum in order for T1 to just not lose their entire base as soon as they commit Fiora top. But instead, RNG moves Breeze towards mid, they have Yahoo pressure at top. It's not that Silas is a bad side laner by any means, but his side lane pressure is a lot weaker compared to Fiora because he has to commit all of his abilities. And I kind of see what RNG is going for here, right? They have a couple of nice wards here. They have a ward here. They have a ward here. They have a wave here. There's a couple of places where Silas with the Akali are can threaten. Problem is that T1's comp functionally into RNG's comp, I think just is too good, honestly. Perfect execution, great into dive. That ult, great into dive. Jayce, pretty good into dive. They have so many champions here that can just play so far away from RNG's engage and poke them down. Or just negate their engage entirely. And I think compositionally, combined with all the decisions throughout the game, is what leads to this fight going to and it's why Zeus gets so strong here. It's why his champion just works really well. We see here, he's just able to output damage pretty freely. The bailout's able to allow him to stay in the fight even longer and force Breathe to overcommit to killing him. And so all these factors, Zeus's effective farming, I'm going to put this into a list. So Zeus farms well. 2. Side picks stall. And 3. RNG Wonder lanes. And what I mean by that third point is it's not that their laning phase is bad, it's that their lane assignments, I'll move this a bit somewhere else so it's like a bit more viewable. These 3, in my opinion, are what allowed T1 to come back into the game. And of course, I think Guma played fantastically. I think Garia played fantastically. I think Owner and Faker did what they could. And I think Zeus, even though he died a lot, you know, there were some pretty bad blunders this game from him. I think he did a good job of keeping himself in the game through farming and just through team play, that he's able to still be relevant on this Jayce, even though he's really far behind. So those are just some things I wanted to highlight from this game. I don't think it's all on Zeus by any means. Like I said, I think Buma is the biggest factor for T1 being able to win this game. But I think Zeus, in the way he played the game, as well as the effects this game had to kind of help him out, as well as negate RNG's lead from both teams, just their general decision making, is something worth highlighting and considering when kind of looking at these games. Beyond just saying, oh, well, you know, Guma played really well, he bot gapped Gala, and he was able to get a massive lead over him in that a lot of time. And yeah, that is part of it, but it's not the whole story in my opinion. So I hope this is interesting for you all. I'm gonna probably be covering some World's Final games. Hopefully there's something interesting there. Thank you for watching, as always. Feel free to comment if you have any requests. of games you'd like me to look at, maybe solo queue VODs or other Worlds games, maybe specific player champion picks, that kind of thing. Or if you have any further questions in the comments or anything you want me to clarify, feel free to do that as well, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.